everyone. Welcome to this wealthmanagement.com fast chat. I'm Shannon Rossick. I'm joined by Sheila Kafari Agassi, Executive Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer at United Planners Financial Services. So Sheila, thank you so much for joining me. And while this may be a fast chat, developing culture within a firm is not so quick. So I have to start by asking, what is a kick-ass culture to you?
Great question. So, hello, Shannon. Thanks for having us here today. And it's all part of our culture. Obviously, is to share information and to be open and transparent. But to me, really, a kick-ass culture is a team of people all being on the same page. And because I'm a visual person, I like to kind of envision it as our entire employee force working together, locked arm in arm, all working towards and migrating their way towards meeting the firm's overall objectives and continuing towards those same goals with a smile on their face. If at any point along the way, and we, United Planners has 80 home office employees, 80 plus, at any point along the way, if someone should fall down running towards those goals, that, the rest of the group would stop, make sure they pick that person up, relock elbows with them, and then make sure that we continue on that same path together, united as a team. So to me, that's kind of the definition. I'll tell you that there's a lot of different ways to get there. And I think we're going to talk about some of those. We'll share a lot of tips and tricks here today. But I do want to quote my partner, Billy Oliverio. He often says it's having fun while getting it done. And there's so much in just that little statement. You got to have fun while getting it done. And along the way, celebrating accomplishments, whether it's celebrating anniversaries or, culture, team building events, celebrating successes along the way, even if they're itty bitty little, smiling, right? Because we spend a lot of time at work, and sometimes we spend more time with the people we work with than we do our own families. So have fun while getting it done. And that is a direct quote from my partner, Billy Oliverio.
I can hear Billy saying that and put it on a t-shirt. That is a great mantra. But you alluded to it a little bit, but there must just be a lot of moving parts when it comes to creating a great culture. So where can someone just even get started if they do want to create that incredible kick-ass culture?
Yes. So it really starts by defining, who do you want to be? What does that look like for you? What is your overall mission, and how do you want to be known as and for by your clients, by your community? How do you want to be known? And then you build a path, you kind of start here, and then how are we going to get here? This is your vision, right? And creating that vision of how you're going to get there. And then we've taken that and gone even a step further, is identifying, the ideal client. Who do we want to work with? Because bad clients can ruin your culture, frankly. And then, it's also very key to have the right employees. So identifying that ideal characteristics of your employees, right? They're there to help, they're there to, fulfill, and they really invest and breed within the culture. So I'll talk a little bit about, mission, because they said that's kind of where it starts. The mission is what you want to be known for. So for example, our mission, is to be the premier employee and advisor-owned partnership of elite financial professionals who are mutually committed to exceeding client expectations. So together, right, we talk about being together and on the same page and locking elbows, in that mission statement. And then our vision just talks a lot about, how are we going to get there? What are we going to do? And we discuss, delivering impeccable service while fostering collaborative and personable culture. How we're going to achieve growth and how we're going to retain those ideal clients. So when you talk about where you want to be, how you're going to get there, then you get the team to buy into that. And frankly, your team should be involved in helping build those mission and vision statements, defining the ideal clients. Well, what do you like about, Mrs. Jones or Sally Smith? I mean, what are the favorite key characteristics? If you could take your favorite client that you work with and we could replicate that, what are those characteristics? And then you're identifying your ideal client. And then pick your top employee, right? What are those characteristics about that employee or the top characteristics of every one of your employees? So your next new hire, you're looking for some of those same characteristics. They're really buying into the team mentality, methodology. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about that, but I just want to use an example. When you have the right employees, if it's 4:30, 4 o'clock on a Friday night, and one employee has a stack of files to still get through, this big, and the employee next to them goes, I've been done since 3 o'clock, that's not fostering a great culture. When that other employee says, hey, we can both get out of here at 4:30 today if I help you with those files, that's going to help. And then when those files transfer to the next employee and this guy over here says, hey, let me help you with those. Let's both get out of here on time. That's no man left behind. That's somebody, who broke out of the arm holds, and then the other team members came, pick them up, made sure that they were back on solid footing, relocked elbows, and continued toward the same goals. So that's just an example of that. It's really leadership. Employees aren't always going to do that by themselves. It takes leadership to help coach people into what your expectations are, because there are a lot of employees who would rather just sit there and twiddle their thumbs and let the clock tick down. They're not actively out looking for things to do. And if you tell me that you have every single employee is out there on their own initiative and doing it all themselves, I'm going to say, wow, you hit the lottery. That's pretty incredible. But since that's not the case, and you have to motivate people and you have to hold them accountable, and it really comes from that leadership that's going to help drive that.
And so you mentioned holding people accountable, which can sometimes be a little bit of a dirty word, particularly when it pertains to culture. Because isn't that sometimes contrary to great culture? Creating that idea of just accountability.
That's a great question. Accountability it can be a strong word. And, when you're a great leader, you're going to lay out your expectations very clearly. You're going to have deadlines. And when you have the right employees, they're really going to hold themselves accountable. But, they don't want to be lost and they don't want to be roaming around. They want that leadership. They want that guidance. They want to hear from you what they can be doing better. And some people think it's demotivating to give that guidance to their employees. And I will tell you, I think it's really contrary. When you have, go-getters who are out there looking for things, you don't say, hey, you did this wrong. It's like, here's how to get to the next level. So it's that coaching, and that brings in the accountability. So again, when you have the right employees, they're going to hold themselves accountable, and they care about reaching goals, fulfilling the company's missions and vision. They're going to follow up on their own commitments naturally, and they're going to want to meet deadlines. But you really just need to keep giving them that next ability to grow, into their next role. And that's where, to get here, I need you to be doing these things and hold them accountable to it. Absolutely. It's natural to make mistakes. People make mistakes. And I often say, first of all, respond to those with kindness, with respect. We are human beings. And I make mistakes. It hurts. It hurts my soul when I make a mistake, but it happens. And that's because, we're accountable to ourselves, and we've just got so much, and we're driving so hard all the time. But when one of your employees makes a mistake, it's really important that, you don't pin them against a wall. You don't make them feel like they have no way out, and that because they already hold themselves accountable. They feel terrible about it. And so you can take that opportunity to say things like, maybe I didn't train you right on this. Let's revisit this. Let's talk about, a different way that I can convey this information so that this does not reoccur in the future. And you can basically take responsibility for their mistake in a situation like that. So again, leadership, this is all just part of not making somebody go home and cry at night, but rather, being really excited about this new opportunity to learn a new way to do something that can really have a different result. And now they get to be accountable and prideful of their work product.
And as you mentioned, it really all starts from the top, right? It's a trickle down effect. And if you don't have empathetic leaders who are willing to take that approach, that can be a huge struggle.
You're right. You're right. Yeah. I mean, you need to be empathetic. You need to kind of lead by example, right? It's if you expect your staff to do a bunch of stuff that you're not doing yourself, well, you're probably not going to get the right result that you're after. I always say transparency too. Transparency is just so key. Your employees can smell when something's off. They just know, right? You're not telling me something, and there's no expectation that, a leader within an organization can share everything that they know, because that can be contrary to culture as well. Somebody might be having a personal situation that you just can't share with the rest of the team, but the team needs to rely on you and trust you that you know what's going on, that you have a plan, and that you're not able to share that plan right now, but no one, rest assured, if you were in a personal situation, I would not be sharing that information with the rest of the team either. And so we're going to give this person some grace. We're going to back off, and, here's how we're going to handle those job duties and functions. Transparency, open book, really just, again, kindness and respect all the time, and making sure that, that's conveyed amongst the team, earning that trust from your teammates. They will follow you anywhere you lead them, if they have trust for you, and empowering them to make decisions where you can. And right out the gate, maybe the first 3 years that somebody's with you, maybe they're not allowed to make decisions, because it is your organization. You are the owner of that business, and therefore, they need to do things the way that you need them done. But once they've established that trust back from you, then you can start to let go a little bit and really empower them to start making decisions on their own. Guidance here and there, right? You're always going to be there to help guide, put up the guardrails. Here's what I recommend in this situation, or I suggest this, but it's not I said to do it this way. It's their guardrails and overall suggestions. One of the other things that I would just say is, finding people's pillars of strength. I am a big believer in, right brain attributes and left brain attributes. So some people live in their right brain more, some people live in their left brain more. And as a leader, you need to know and understand that, because if you have a left brain person in a right brain role, you've set that person up for failure. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad employee. It just means that they're in the wrong role. And maybe, you're hiring for a right brain person, but you didn't even realize that person had the strengths because you've been kind of pigeonholing them to a left brain role. And for those of you who don't know, right brain's kind of more marketing, visual, maybe client communications, client relationship manager, whereas a left brain's going to be writing WSPs and, maybe auditing and, really in the weeds doing your, financial analytics. So having the right person in the right role is really, really important. And there's some different tools out there that you may consider, like a Strengths Finder, for example, is a really great one. You can learn how people want to be communicated with. I actually just did it with my 14-year-old daughter. If there's any women here watching that have teenage daughters, I strongly recommend it. We had one in common. I'm like, ooh, I can relate to that. It's not just with your employees. There's another one, 16 personalities. And I did that with, my team and my direct reports. And you kind of fall into one of these 16 personalities. And then again, how do we relate? How do you want to be communicated with? Where are your strengths? Are you more right-brained or more left-brained? And then make sure that you can realign their job descriptions based on their strength set. So these are all little things. Last, I just say celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Every little milestone. So for example, my team has a maritime bell, the old ship bell. And when there's an accomplishment. Someone has finished something that they set out to, succeed upon. They can go ring that bell and everyone's going to stop and clap and say, right on, that's awesome. And they're cognizant not to do that while we're on the phone, with a client. I mean, nobody wants to be a bell ring, but it's still, taking a moment. And if you're having a bad day and maybe something that you really wanted to finish, didn't get done, and you found problem after problem that day, it's nice to just stop and celebrate, your fellow employees' accomplishments and just be excited for them. So that's something really simple, easy. Happy hours are always great. Obviously, any of these things can be overdone. Bringing in lunch for the staff, that can be overdone. So switch it up, think about ways and poll your audience, ask your employees, how do we create an amazing culture here? And some of them will say money, that's not always the answer either. But you can, like I said, celebrate anniversaries. I write a birthday card and an anniversary card, for every single one of our employees, at the beginning of the month, but it has a very special message for each one of them. And my fellow partners do the same thing. So we take the time to sign those, really letting our employees know how special and how recognized they are during their work anniversaries and their birthdays. Food trucks, honoring vacation time. I think that's huge. Making sure that your employees are cross-trained, that they kind of see a path to their next level of success by cross-training, by being able to back each other up and being able to honor that person's vacation time when they're out of the office, that they're not having to, call in and be bogged down by things that only they can do. So, lots of different ideas. Charitable giving, that's the last one I guess I really want to mention is, having your team vote on a charity, maybe a local charity that you all want to work to support, whether that's a cereal drive, a penny drive. You can, put on your tool belts and go out and build for Habitat for Humanity. You can do a fundraise, all kinds of fun stuff that you can do to, really celebrate each other and work outside of the office. So that's how you build a kick-ass culture.
Man, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, those are just incredible pieces of advice and incredible tips. And especially in this hybrid world that we live in now, striking that balance between in-office initiatives, we get so bogged down in the minutia sometimes. Just being able to celebrate each other really does go a long way, like I said, whether it's in person or virtually. So, I mean, I know at United Planners, this is something that you all live and breathe and you walk the walk, because as we know, culture can be tricky and it's not always as people perceive it to be. But you guys really understand it and understand not only how to make your advisors happy, but ultimately that trickles down to their clients. So Sheila, thank you so much for this advice and your insights.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great chatting.